Welcome to today's podcast roundtable, where we will dive into the topic International Publishing for Beginners. How to break through the reject wall. This episode is part of the CTM Podcast series, which aims to provide practical insights and inspiration for researchers at all stages of their careers. My name is Dezső Csupor, and I will host this conversation. My guests today are distinguished researchers from the Center of Translational Medicine, Andrea Szentesi, Gábor Varga, and Rita Nagy, each of whom have significant experience in publishing in high-impact international journals. Together, we will explore the challenges and strategies of academic publishing, from navigating the peer review process to improving manuscript quality and handling rejection letters constructively. My guests will share their personal experiences, lessons learned, and best practices to help researchers increase their chances of success and make their work visible to the international scientific community. So, what was your first international publishing experience and what kind of challenges did you face?
Yes, it was challenging at first, of course. We were investigating pancreatology research in the last 50 years, so we collected data on publications, different information. For example, was it a single center or a multi-center study, the origin of the study, the topic, and so on. And then we analyzed it, but that was the first time when I had to work through all the submission process. I had to study author guidelines for the first time, of course. So definitely it was much slower than these days already. But fortunately, thanks to my supervisor's experience, we chose a journal which was a good fit for the first time. So we received a minor revision, and we worked through. It was published then quite quickly. So it was very challenging, but I would say not a very difficult first publication.
So was it published in the first journal where you submitted? Oh, yes. Lucky. And what about you, Rita? Do you remember your first publication?
Sure, I remember. My very first paper was published. I think that was the first journal where we submitted. It was a case report, an extended case report, let's say. And in case of case report, there is a huge challenge, I think. And one of the challenges is that most of the journals just do not accept case reports. So that's why you need to filter the journals, which basically allow to submit a case report. But in this case, as I remember, and also it was a pancreatic-related topic about the non-adherence to different guidelines. But then the whole process, I think it was quite smooth for me as well. But in this case, in case of case reports, I would say this is the biggest challenge to find a journal which will finally accept the study design itself. Of course, it is a quite low evidence level, probably. That's the reason for that.
And Gábor, what was your challenge? Do you remember?
Well, I'm an old man, you see. So that was
experienced man.
45 years ago, when we wrote, I started to work actually in the pancreas group at the Institute of Experimental Medicine. So at that time, that was a top research institute. Even today that's a neuroscience institute. That time, that was actually diverse projects and topics. That was actually in the pancreas. The guy who hired me was a very smart, very old physiologist, and then we tried to actually push through his ideas about how to handle acute pancreatitis. This is not solved even today, but at that time, we had no clue, I have to say, in many ways. Actually, that was the time when we were kind of rather isolated, although that institute was a kind of exceptional compared to others. But still, to publish in international journal was not very easy. I think the first paper was in Acta Physiologica Hungarica, which is today Physiology International. And actually it went through quite well, I have to say. But that was long, long ago, so I don't remember the details. Except that I always, when you write a paper, that's a challenge, that has been a challenge, that had been a challenge, and has been a challenge, and even today, that actually puts you in a kind of hard situation if you really want to do a good job.
Yeah, I think we are all lucky because my first paper was also published in the first journal where we submitted. I think this is not typical because sometimes you need much effort and time to find a journal which finally accepts your paper. But now you are supervisors, and as supervisors, what do you think the typical mistakes are that are committed by young researchers who wants to publish something?
I think there are several possible mistakes, avoidable mistakes. For example, when they are rushing to publishing and before polishing the story of the research, also, for example, neglecting or ignoring the requirements that usually journals set for formatting manuscripts, or weak discussion, I would say. That also can be a weakness of a paper and the reason for rejection.
Rita, in your opinion?
I would also highlight the article writing phase. Of course, the scientific question, I think it's rather for the supervisor, not for the PhD student. So, in the case of article writing, I think one of the most common mistake, let's say, or just that's an experience for me, that students are just tend to go into the details and not really focus on one direction, but a little bit talking about this one and this one and this one. And finally, you can realize that you just exceeded the word count, which is usually around, of course, it depends on the journals, but usually it's around 3,000-4,000 words. And I saw really multiple papers or manuscript versions where it was around 7,000 or 8,000 words. So I think this is one of the biggest challenge for the PhD students with no publication experience, how to be really focused and narrow down the content to reach this word limit, which is required.
Gabor, what is your view?
This is quite right, what Rita said. But I would add that, I had lots of fellows whom I directly kind of supervised, and an even much bigger number, which I was a kind of supervisor at the second level. Their attitude is quite different. Some of them, have actually very high level of confidence, much higher than it should be, and some others have very low level of confidence, much lower than it should be. And then both of them, at the beginning, there are just very few who are in the right track, I have to say. So actually this is supervisor job, I would say, in many ways, or those who are supporting actually the more experienced colleagues. And especially in the past. And then in programs when the supervisors are not at very high level, the students could be lost. Just for the reason what actually Rita said, that the lack of focus, a lack of really understanding not only how to write a paper, but what is the real essential message actually of your work. It could help actually if there is a team who supports this, but at the beginning, I would say again just lack of focus, and then also the too high level of confidence that I'm perfect, or the too low level that I know nothing.
Even though a paper is good, it might be rejected. Gábor, what do you think? What is your experience? What is the most common reason for rejection nowadays?
Well, it depends on which level of journal you go. If you go to really high level of journal, so I mean a Q1 journal, or even the top journals, you have to be ready for rejection. I mean, most of the journals actually, I mean, the top journals, I mean, they have a rejection rate over 90%. And then it doesn't depend only the quality of the paper, but that also depends on the taste of the editor, and also that they also look some searches. You see, I mean, the journals also compete with each other. So therefore, I mean, this is actually a message for those who are beginners in this, that don't get down if you have a rejection. Because if you have a rejection, that may mean that you went to a strong journal. And then maybe you have to go to 3-4 journals before actually the given editor. So this is not fair in many times, actually. But this is also I would say that learning procedure. I mean, we will go later on this. But if you get a rejection, you should be proud of that, actually, instead of losing your confidence. Because that means that, especially if the paper is rejected without a review. That's another thing when you get a review. But many journals, many editors actually reject a paper because they think that either the project doesn't fit to the journal well, or, and today maybe this is more important, that particular paper will not get that high level of citation which keeps the competitiveness of the given journal.
Yeah, and it's a pity because there are some topics that are not highly cited. Although are not highly cited, the result itself might be very important. So it's a bias which is not very, very useful. Do you have something to add to this question? Any personal experiences or views about the rejection reasons?
Yes, actually Gábor mentioned that even a very good quality paper can be rejected, but there are some, I think, specific reasons why journals can reject papers. It can be lack of novelty, or even the scope of the journal is not a good fit for that specific paper. So there could be really a lot of reasons for rejection, and I agree with Gábor that that shouldn't be a reason for, how to say it, getting down because of this decision. Just have to go further and find the right journal.
But especially if you are a PhD student, you would like to finish your work on time. That's why you would like to avoid rejection. How to choose a journal to avoid high number of rejections? What is your personal strategy when choosing a journal?
First, I think the scope is very important, and also the audience, the readers, the readership of the journal, because a smaller specified journal could be better for your specific topic, even if it's the readership is not very wide. And of course, the scope is very important if you would like your research to target the right people who will really use it. Publication speed also counts, especially in cases, for example, when PhD students have time constraints to finish their studies, and there are huge differences among journals in publication speed. It can be from few weeks. From submission to publication can be from few weeks up to several months.
Rita, what is your opinion about choosing an appropriate journal?
What I would highlight again, of course, similar things. I think the scope is the first. So your papers or manuscripts topic should fit the scope of the journal. So this is one. Or if your topic is a very specific one, where the audience is a quite narrow one, of course there is a possibility to write the editor whether they are interested in your paper or not, and you can save time and not just submitting again and again your paper. So this is one, the scope. And the another, yes, there are objective parameters you can check on the journal's website, how many days are needed until the review or the publication, etc. So you can rely on these relatively objective parameters. Yes, and also, of course, you need to be realistic. So if you have a paper which may be a little bit lacks of novelty, so maybe it won't bring a very new scientific result to the world, then maybe you shouldn't target the most highest impact journals. So you need to be realistic. This is again, but maybe it's worth trying, because once your manuscript are sent to review, even though your paper won't be published in that very high impact journal, but you can get very useful reviews. So this is another point. I think maybe it's worth targeting high impact journals, because the reviews are really high quality ones, and you can use it for the next submission period.
I think it's a good attitude to see the possibility or the opportunity to improve the paper during a rejection. So it's a positive attitude. Gábor, do you agree with this? Is it worth trying? Even with journals?
In general, actually this has changed in my life career, I have to say. I mean, what I see. Because today I really see that it is good to go for the impossible. It is good to go to a journal when it is highly, highly unlikely that you are accepted. So if you follow this attitude, then you will go to a very high, of course, I mean, the paper has to be good. But if you and your supervisors, colleagues, the team agrees that this is a good paper, and of course, I mean, that counts a lot. So the basis is to have a kind of good manuscript. Then we have to go to a very high level of journal, maybe the top one or the second one or so, I mean, in the whole area, and then get ready for rejection. Because maybe you don't get a rejection. Actually, most of the top journals do the rejection actually in 2 or 3 days, because the editors are quite well experienced, and then without a review, I mean, they have the right actually to reject. But in this way, I mean, that's not very, good. I mean, the feeling is not very good when you get a rejection. But also that if you have a bigger team, like the Center of Translational Medicine, we target Journal of Dental Research, which in many ways is actually believed to be the top journal of the field, knowing that most of the papers are going to be rejected without a review. But what happened is that we kept sending their papers, and finally one was accepted, already published. I also did this actually, that I have a published paper there, but I have quite a few rejections too. But if you don't send your paper to the best place, it will not be published in the best place. And really, I mean, when you do your research, that's not only about impact factors. So, I mean, what you do is that you have an important issue, an important question, you worked a lot, and the people whom you work, and then you don't want it to fall into a black hole. What you want is you see that people read it, and then people actually use it. So therefore, that's the follow-up is the citations and so. So science is not really accountable if there is no citations, if there is no readers or reading, and then there is no consequences of those. So therefore, I really strongly believe today that we have to go to high-level journals, and those who actually in very top journals, most of the rejections are coming actually in 2 or 3 days. That is also my experience, but that with the quality what we actually do here, the technical quality, if the question is good, and then the paper goes to a regular review, that it is highly likely that after a couple of steps, I mean reviews, not one, but maybe 2 or 3 review steps, I mean, it is going to be accepted. Of course, I mean that you need this kind of strong methodology background, and also that the whole team works together, and that it's well told. But if this is the case, just go for the top.
There are different strategies about how to publish. For example, I have some friends who prefer collecting the data for several years and preparing a paper which is very substantial, contains several data, and they do not publish very frequently. And there are some other colleagues who prefer publishing short articles with not so substantial content. So what is your personal strategy? Publishing several papers with smaller amounts of data, or collecting huge amounts of data and publishing rarely papers? What is better? What is your opinion, Gábor? What is your personal strategy?
Again, this has been changed by the time. You see, when I was a starter in research, quantity was more important than quality. And then people just accommodate. I did that too. I mean, we had to publish a certain number of papers, otherwise you are in danger that you lose your job or whatever. So at that time, we tried to publish multiple papers instead of focused ones. I mean, the strong ones, which have a big amount of research investment. But then I learned that it is much better to publish actually bigger units with strong hypothesis. Actually, this hypothesis is proven by a number of different methods. And then also the discussion is deep. And all of this is fundamental. So this is not only CTM, but not only this kind of clinical translational medicine. But I'm coming from the basic science side. And I have to say that if you don't use 4 or 5 different methods to support your evidence, what you provide as an evidence, then it is going to be rejected. Not because that's the taste of the editor, but because the evidence is not strong enough. So therefore, bigger units are, of course, there are journals who publish these very short kind of things, but it may fly away. Maybe it just published, but nobody cites this. Or, this is again another thing that, so there are some fundamental observations which actually later on earned a Nobel Prize, and maybe 2 or 3 pages, or just a few, because there is a very fundamental and important ideas. But I have to say that most of us is not like that. There are not very many among us that who have a Nobel Prize. We know a couple of Nobel Prize winners, of course, in the system. But we saw actually they are very different. So there is not absolute. There's the other thing. There is not absolute way for this. What to follow. What is very important is that you need if you want to really contribute to science, you need a good hypothesis, and then you have to prove the hypothesis. And depending on And that could actually add. That could add to basic science. That could also add to clinical science. And then actually caring and then curing people.
Rita, do you have a personal strategy, or you change depending on the topic?
I wouldn't say I have personal strategy. I'm quite beginner in science, so I don't have, not yet, I would say. I think it's a kind of balance. So it really depends on the study design. If you are working in basic science or clinical science, if there is a huge database available already, or you need to do the data input. So really, it depends on several factors. Also, if, for example, if you are conducting some investigation in a very hot topic, maybe you don't want to wait for years, you want to publish it now. So I would say it depends. And also if you are a young researcher, maybe you don't want to spend years if it's not needed, especially in clinical science. If you want to have publications in the first years already, then maybe you don't want to wait to have so robust data. But after, for example, a couple of publications, maybe these researchers are desiring having more robust data, more substantial paper that you mentioned. So yeah, multiple factors, I think. But I would say as a PhD student, maybe I would choose something in the middle. Not going only for the very, very fast publication with, for example, lower quality. But also I think it's worth considering not spending years on one publication, if it's possible. But again, in I think the basic science, that's something different.
And what is your experience on the?
I think that every publication has to be whole and round on its own. So it depends on the topic that whether for example, a short publication could be much more impactful than a long, very detailed study. It depends on the research topic, really. And if you work for a long time, for years, to line up one big catch, there is always the risk that someone else will get there first, and you miss the opportunity to be the first one.
And if you receive a review report from the journal, how do you handle these reviews? Is there a practice how you answer the remarks? Is there something which helps you to be successful after answering these reports?
Yes, I think that these comments and recommendations are very, very useful. So actually we have to be grateful for them, for reviewers, because they spend a lot of time. And if they pick really those things that can be either corrected or modified in your study, and it will make your paper better, then you win. So it's really very useful to go through every comment, but also you have to use your judgment. So, for example, I remember a case when we submitted a paper and we received a major revision decision with an awful lot of comments, and all the suggestions would have shifted our paper to a direction we didn't want. So in this case, we decided to withdraw the submission and send it to a more appropriate journal. And finally, it got accepted. So I think it's very important to have a balance in what to accept and how to react to these comments. They can guide us, but we have to avoid that these comments dictate what is our real message.
How do you react typically to these reports.
May I have one question too on this? So in this case that you mentioned, you haven't started a debate with the reviewer?
Yes, we had started.
Okay.
We tried to actually convince that there is a line we would like to follow, and that's very important in this topic. And it came back almost exactly as at the first time. And then we decided that it's not worth going to that direction because it will change our message completely.
Yeah, sure. So as for me, one thing that's very important, and also for the young ones who has only a few experience with reviewers' comments, don't take it personal. So that's very important. Sometimes the style can be quite rude, honestly, but you need to consider these comments really objectively as much as possible. So this is, I think, a very important message. And the other thing that, Andy highlighted that, of course, reviewers are just human beings. So sometimes maybe they just don't notice something, or maybe they just misunderstood something. But you have the chance to explain why you wrote that, why you used that analysis or something like that. So I think you absolutely have the opportunity to have a debate, of course, in a logical way with the reviewers. And then, of course, maybe the final point will be just a disagreement, and then you can withdraw the paper. Maybe it's not that common, but you can disagree with the reviewer. So that's very important point. And also just how to comment on the reviewers' comments. So this is just a message to the young ones that if you get the comments, you need to answer each comment point by point. So this is very important. I had a few experience from, for example, this letter with the answers to the comments went back with maybe one or two answered were missing, and they immediately sent back, okay, we didn't answer all the comments, so please correct it. So that's another message from my experience package.
Gábor, your view?
Well, I see this from a little different angle, because I'm on the other side too, you see. I mean, I have been doing reviews for long. Then I was the editor of oral diseases, and then for Frontiers of Physiology. And then the last 4 years I has been editor for scientific reports. And I do see, I mean, that's from the editorial side, and I also see the reviewer side. There is an important jump over there. I mean, and the editors and the reviewers don't do a good job, then the journal will actually go down. And also you have a certain responsibilities. This is something which you don't earn money, but actually you earn quite a bit of experience. My general understanding is that most of the reviewers want to do a good job. And that really happens. I mean, today, there are some strange things too. Then a reviewer used artificial intelligence and then just give the notion to the program that you should reject or you should accept, and then you have lots of comments on those, but many of them seem to be quite strange. So I see that both as an author and as an editor. But this is not the most common thing. The most common thing is that the reviewers, actually that's very hard to find reviewers anymore, because that is not paid, and that is takes you away from your main job, I would say in research. But still you can find them, and then most of them are reasonable. And then here comes what Rita says, that's very important to take all the questions seriously and then answer them well, actually respond them well. if you don't agree on something, I would put that into a somewhat different angle. Maybe I'm too opportunistic or too practical on this reason. As a basic rule, the reviewer is always right. So now, what if the reviewer is not right? Try to respond in a way that yes, you are right, but
yeah.
So, and then give that this is a specific issue because this is somewhat different, and then explain, but with good, not by force, but by brain. So that's important because reviewers understand actually if they are wrong on something, but not if you just say that this is stupid and that I will not change. There are certain situations, what we have heard, that the reviewer wants to push through something which you don't want, and then you have to withdraw and then go to another journal. But this is not the usual case. I mean, in the usual case, actually, I mean, again, I saw many of these, that many of the reviewers, and on the editing side too, that everybody has strong responsibilities, I mean, on both sides. And then we have to accept those, even if there is a rejection. But if you have written a good paper, I mean, together with your team, again, because this is a teamwork, and then during the review, even if there are lots of questions, you reply everything well, you are most probably winning. By the way, I mean, my other experience is that if you have 50 questions, that's much better than to have 3 questions. Yes. Because the 3 questions usually comes together with that, because those are the major issues, and the reviewer or the editor doesn't like it, so he just wants to give some arguments that why to reject it, and that is not really helpful many times, because that may be unfair. This we also have to kind of swallow, I would say, digest. But the other thing is that even if you get a rejection, but you get a kind of in-depth review, that is very good for you, because you have to use that in your revision. And then hopefully the paper is going, actually many of the journals says that we don't accept this, but consider that this kind of changes, maybe you can either resubmit that to us or to others, and or to other journals, and then we have to take this seriously, I think.
And what about the situations when you feel that there is some bias from the side of the reviewer? For example, I had an experience where one reviewer suggested us to cite some papers which turned out to be from the same author. And it was also claimed that you should cite these papers, especially this one, which is the Bible of this topic. And all those 5 papers that were suggested to be cited were from the same group. And I had the idea that maybe the reviewer belongs to this group. So how to handle these situations, because this is very sensitive.
Yes, actually we had this kind of comment once, and we very carefully explained that why it didn't match with our topic. Actually, it was a completely different one. I would say it was a surgery article, and our topic was not surgery at all. So we were very politely and carefully, but explained that it does not fit into this
What was the
article,
decision of the...
And they just let it not citing it. Yes.
Have you ever had similar experiences?
I haven't had such experience, but I would imagine that, okay, if the reviewer is asking for example, putting 1 citation, okay, let's do that. But asking for 5 ones, I think maybe it's not that ethical.
Yes.
I agree on both of this, but also I'm opportunistic, I would say, practical. If the citation fits well, I think that could be cited, even if more than one. Also because, especially in basic science, if you go to a high-level journal, you could expect and then accept that the reviewer is your competitor. And the competitor would like to see his arguments too. So maybe you put it there, and then you can also give us some kind of discussions on that. This is true, but maybe not in all constellations, and so. So, I think that's reasonable to use this kind of extra references, but you have to deal with that in a kind of polite but critical way. And that actually, I mean, so research ethics are very important. So you have to keep the ethical rules, but you also have to be practical. And also, you have to be open-minded for the suggestions. Not only, I mean, citations, but you have to be open-minded that the reviewers could give actually very good ideas. I mean, I saw many papers which became my papers too, but as an editor too, is that how the paper became much better after the review.
Okay. In the past, some decades ago, it was very typical to see single-author papers in journals. Today, it is not common. And many think that one key for success is to have big collaborating teams in the list of authors. Do you agree that papers that have a quite long list of authors might be more successful than papers that have only 2 or 3 authors? Is there a link between the number of authors and the rate of success?
It also depends on the topic, I think. In clinical research, usually papers have more authors, and it's good because data are coming from several centers or even several countries, which makes it a much usable database. It will yield higher evidence, definitely, and also the generalizability of the findings will be higher. So I think in clinical research, definitely collaborations are very useful.
And what about, for example, basic science, Gábor? Do you think that it is?
Yeah, I mean, in basic science that happens. I mean, I have been involved both as a principal investigator when we included some, not only internationals, actually Hungarian ones, and then some of them invited us because we had a certain type of methodology. I mean, to develop a methodology, a certain methodology, especially if that is complicated, it could take 2 or 3 years, let's say that. But the question is there, and again, what I said before, that if there is a hypothesis, and then you come up with a kind of conclusion, then you have to, in basic science, certainly, you have to show that it is true actually with multiple methods. And then you don't have all the methods by your hand. Also, if you can work together with those that who are very specialists in the area, I mean, different angles, I mean, together we are much, much stronger than alone. So in basic science, certainly that is true. But actually, I also see that from the clinical kind of research too, that multiple angles could be very, very good. If that is a real collaboration, and not just putting somebody there because he is a big boss of something or the editor or so. Although we also have to consider that many of the editors are very high level in science. I mean, this is why they actually became to that position. So that can be done if if you include somebody who is very influential in a certain area because he has a very special expertise and also a very big brain, I would say, that who can contribute to the paper. And that stands not only for international ones, collaboration, but in local ones too. So, for example, what we try to nourish for quite a while in Semmelweis University is collaborations between different departments, both in the basic science and in the clinical science, and in between different faculties and so on. That is not that easy, because everybody is just building his or her own project traditionally. And then in today's science, I mean, to get good advance and then really have kind of, again, strong papers, then you need these kind of collaborations locally. So I would always try to do that locally and then step nationwide. And of course, I mean, if you are in a well-established international collaboration, that's natural that you work together on those.
Yeah, maybe one important message to young researchers is that it is essential to build collaboration networks, because nowadays this is very important, not only to have friends in science, but also to be effective. Rita, you are a practicing physician and also a clinical researcher. How can you do this maybe different jobs together? Do you have enough energy, time, or how can you handle this?
Maybe these are not so different things. I mean, I think, okay, maybe not everyone, but I would suggest most of the physicians to try to combine these things, because these are related ones. So you can collect the research ideas from your clinical work, and this is the next step, of course, to then let's conduct a research on something and turn this whole idea into the evidence. So I think this is a circle. These are, of course, connected to each other. That's another question. Maybe it's not that common to do it parallelly. Of course, it's about time, but I wouldn't say that it's a very different parts of the life. But of course, sometimes it's very challenging because it requires the same source, and this is the time. So,
but somehow you solved, because you are successful in both parts.
Yes, you need to block the time for your research, for article writing, because of course when you sit down to start writing or just continue the writing of your manuscript, it's not like sitting down and answering 10 emails, for example, because you need to focus, you need to get into this whole topic. So this is, I think, a very crucial point, that if you want to deal with research, then you need to just somehow block the time for that, and not just, okay, now I have 1 hour to do something, because you won't be probably very efficient in it.
Your example is quite rare, I think, because you did not start your career in life sciences and later you switched. How challenging is such a change to change totally your direction, what you are working on?
Actually, I wouldn't say it was a total switch. It was more like combining the two, because economics gave me very valuable tools, for example, data analysis or systems thinking. So I always try to combine the clinical questions with broader healthcare impact considerations. And what is fascinating for me is how a clinical question is transformed into a research project, and then it makes its way back to patient care. So I think that having with diverse backgrounds, we can succeed in this field.
Yeah, maybe that's the real answer. And Gábor, you supervise the work of several PhD students parallelly. what is your secret recipe to do it successfully?
I am not the perfect supervisor. And I made many mistakes in my life. I try to learn. One common thing is that we are in a good mood for quite a while. And then there are tough situations. Then I have to be tough too. Both at the actual research phase, no matter this is basic science or clinical, if somebody is just very slow, somebody doesn't do the job, I have to, I guess, become stronger. And then we are not that very good friends anymore. The other phase, when the fellow, most of the research, the experimental part, or the searching, whatever, extraction, and so is done, and the fellow writes the paper. The first instance, the fellow writes the paper, and then he comes up with a manuscript, which is usually, at the beginners again. I'm talking about the beginners. I shouldn't say garbage, but it is not publishable at all. And then that is the phase when we became not so good friends anymore again for a while. Because then I come up with some strange ideas. Actually, this is what CTM does too. Just be strict. These have to be done in that way. High level of freedom should be given to the fellows. This is what I also learned. The highest which is possible. But with different fellows, this freedom is different, depend on the person. Because some persons, if they have full freedom, they do nothing. Okay. Some others, if you give too much restrictions, actually the person is frozen, especially if very initiative. So you have to deal with, just like in normal life, you have to deal with different people if you are a leader, of course. Or you are the responsible PI or whatever. You have to be open-minded. I'm not saying that I didn't make many mistakes, because I did. And I'm still in a learning procedure, how to deal with people.
Maybe flexibility is important.
Yeah, but on one side you have to be flexible. On the other side, if there is a deadline, there's no flexibility. If there is a, let's say, a given part of the research to be done, and the fellow believes that we don't need to do that because why? You just take the easy way. And we don't want to take the easy way. Because good science is about the complexity too. Good hypothesis, but also the complexity, and then working together. And so therefore, this is a very difficult question, I have to say. I'm still learning. I'm still doing mistakes. But maybe by the time when I die, I will be an almost perfect supervisor.
It's going to be the biggest mistake, right? But this is a very good point. I completely agree that you need to take into account the different personalities and handle your students based on them. Because I completely agree that some of the students really, they need the deadlines. But for the others, for example, they just want to somehow get out of this, these frames, and still they can do a very good job. So that's an absolutely good point.
Okay, and the last question goes to all of you. What would be your only one advice to a young researcher or a PhD student who is working on her or his first paper? What is the most essential thing that he or she has to keep in mind?
You mean that before publication or before publication? I would say that before publication is the focus is the most important, and it was mentioned by Rita earlier, but I think that's what I met most of the time when someone just got off the track. It's very hard to get some students on focus. I would say that's one of the most important things.
Rita, any other suggestion apart from the focus, keeping the focus?
I would say patience as well, because it takes time. Sometimes you really don't want to do that, but you need to sit down. So patience, and also resilience, because sometimes it can get very difficult how to get over different situations. So I would say these two things.
Gábor, your ultimate advice?
Yeah, I will give just not a full picture, because for the full answer, I mean, we have to sit here for another hour or so. But what I really saw, especially because this is for beginners, I mean, those who write the first paper, do not overcomplicate. This is what I commonly see. I mean, they overcomplicate. And then we can say be focused too. I mean, so that's the same thing. But what happens is that, I mean, you also have to give the freedom. I mean, if you want to write 20,000 words, write the 20,000. Then we have to go back, actually. But then, very important to be focused. And also, you must have a clear hypothesis. And then you have to prove that hypothesis clearly. And everything which is not about that, I mean, should be dropped. So, focused and do not overcomplicate. And then rely on your colleagues.
Thank you.
That's important.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to this podcast. We don't have the philosopher's stone, so maybe there are other views, but I hope that we could help the young researchers to give some ideas how they should perform or carry out their research. Thank you again for accepting our invitation, and thank you for the audience as well.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.